going on, YouTube? So today I wanted to do my Week 8 college football predictions for 2015 season. So season's about halfway over now. I believe it's officially halfway over. So yeah, weird to think it's already, or so much has already been done. But like I said, season's going by fast like always. So yeah, go ahead and get started. So my first game is Temple and East Carolina. So I believe this game's played on Thursday night. East Carolina it's hard to make in the American Athletic Conference right now. They had a decent win against Tulsa last week, a pretty good Tulsa team. Excuse me. But this is a tough game. Temple is a very good defense. East Carolina still does have a pretty good offense even after losing Lincoln Riley. But I do think that Temple's a little too much for East Carolina. I think that Temple will continue to be undefeated. And yeah, move on to being still a contender in the American Athletic Conference. So next game is Cal and UCLA. So this is a game that a couple weeks ago looked like it would have a lot more meaning than it does now. UCLA has lost, I believe it's 2 in a row now. And it's hard to see them recovering too much from where they were a couple weeks ago. A couple weeks ago they were number 6 in the nation. They were, they looked like they were a team on the fringe of playoff contention, if not already in playoff contention. So tough weeks for UCLA, but I do think they'll bounce back against Cal. California is good, yes, but I think that UCLA will be a little bit better. I think that Josh Rosen is starting to get his inconsistencies out of the way a little bit more now, and I think he'll have a big game and be able to beat Cal at home. So move on to Memphis and Tulsa. So Memphis had a huge win against Ole Miss last week. Tulsa, like I just mentioned, lost to East Carolina. So Memphis is going to be a pretty heavy favorite in this one. I do think they're going to win. I think they're the best non-Power 5 team right now. And I think that they'll continue to maybe even be a dark horse for playoff contention. So move on to Clemson and Miami. So big game in the ACC, one of the bigger ones this weekend. For me, this is just a trap game for Clemson. If they can steer out of it, which I think they will, then they can keep moving in the right direction before the Florida State game. And like I said, this is a game where I think you have to put Clemson on upset alert. Miami's been playing decent this year. They gave Florida State a tough test. They had a big win last week against Virginia Tech, which was huge for them. They did lose their leading tackler for the season, but I still think that the combination of that backfield and then Brad Kaya can at least put up a good fight in the ACC. Move on to Auburn and Arkansas. So again, a game at the beginning of the season looked like it would have a lot more meaning than it does now. So Arkansas has been, to be honest, I think both teams have been steadily getting a tiny bit better because it was hard to get worse than how they both started off the season. Auburn was able to beat a pretty underrated Kentucky team last week, and then Arkansas, has been at least giving teams a run for their money the last couple of weeks, if not winning. So I do think that Arkansas is going to win this game. They do have it at home. And like I said, Auburn hasn't been playing great. Their offense has been looking pretty bad. And Alex Collins has honestly been looking like one of the better running backs in the country this year. Arkansas has been starting to get a few guys back from injury. And, they're starting, like I said, they're starting to look better now. So move on to Iowa State and Baylor. So, Iowa State's been a team that can make some games interesting. Looked like last week against TCU they were going to make it a little bit interesting. But TCU is not Baylor. They're not TCU is one of the better offenses in the country, but they are not the best offense in the country, which Baylor is. So I think the Baylor will run away with this game pretty easily. Probably win by about, I'd say, 28 or 30 points. So move on to Kansas State and Texas. So I think this could be a pretty good game this week. Teams coming off of opposite situations. So Texas coming off the bye with a huge win against OU, and then Kansas State after just getting whacked by OU last week, 55-0 in Manhattan. So I do think that Texas is improving, but I think that Kansas State's going to be pissed off about the way they played last week. Kansas State won in Austin in 2013. I believe they also beat Texas last year, and I think they'll continue that winning streak heading into this year. So move on to Indiana and Michigan State. I think this game will be very close. Michigan State barely survived last week against Michigan. I'm assuming most of you guys saw the botched punt by Michigan, and like I said, I think that Michigan State's going to win this. It might be a 3 to 7 point game, but that's just the way Michigan State's done it this year. So move on to the Duke and Virginia Tech. So Duke, I think if they can get past this game, then they will be able to win the ACC Coastal. But Virginia Tech has been a huge thorn in Duke's side whenever they've been trying to win the ACC Coastal the last couple of years. So I do think that Virginia Tech's going to win this just because they have the game at home. I don't think that Duke is really consistent enough that they'll be able to get it done in a setting like Lane Stadium. So move on to Alabama and Tennessee. So in my opinion, this might be one of the most entertaining games of the weekend, third Saturday in October. So this game was supposed to have a little bit more meaning at this point. I think that it'll show that Tennessee has improved. Obviously, they were able to get a big win against Georgia. I don't think it's going to be... Obviously, I don't think that really Tennessee has much of a chance in this one. I think that Alabama's going to end up winning it in the end by about 7, maybe 10 points. But I think Tennessee will hold strong. Obviously, if Tennessee can win this, then that's not just a monumental win. That's a program-changing win for them. But I don't think that they're going to be able to. So move on to Texas Tech and Oklahoma. So two teams that looked completely opposite last weekend. So Texas Tech struggled with Kansas, who, to be honest, I think is a little bit revitalized with Ryan Willis at quarterback. He looked pretty good last week. But the fact that Texas Tech had to struggle to beat Kansas says a lot. So OU beat Kansas State by, I believe it was 55-0, and the entire team looked like a completely different team than the one that we saw in Red River. So I do think that OU is going to win this. I think it's going to be a lot of the same story as last week. I think OU is still very pissed off about that Texas game. And I think they're going to head into a pretty tough end of October and November slate with a win against Texas Tech. So move on to Washington State and Arizona. So game that's a little bit more interesting than I think a lot of people thought it would be at this point. Even I thought that Arizona would be a top 20 team at least. It's been a rough year for them with injuries and then, just getting pretty much whacked by UCLA earlier this year. So Washington State is 5-2 right now, something that I didn't see coming. Right now, I believe they are tied for second in the Pac-12 North with California. I do think that Arizona is going to win this game, but if you're looking for a game to watch in a, I won't lie, pretty weak slate of games this weekend, then I think that's definitely the one. So move on to Florida State and Georgia Tech. Again, another game that at this point in the year was supposed to have a lot more meaning. Georgia Tech has lost, I believe it's 4 straight now. It might even be 5. I think it's 5. So, I don't think this is going to be any different for them. I think that they can give Florida State a run for their money. I think it'll be closer than a lot of people think. But Dalvin Cook will have his way with the Georgia Tech defense. Florida State defense will show up. And, I think it'll be at least a 14-point game. So move on to Western Kentucky and LSU. So this could actually be a pretty good game this weekend. Western Kentucky is a very good team. They have a very good offense. They have a very good quarterback in Brandon Doughty. So, obviously LSU is, at this point right now, in my opinion, the best team in the SEC. That LSU-Alabama game is going to be a very good game come I believe it's week 10. So, I think this will be a very good game to watch. I believe it's LSU's last game outside of the SEC for the rest of the year. So, like I said, looking for games to watch that aren't really the marquee games of the weekend, then that's another one. So, Texas A&M and Ole Miss. I really think this is probably the best game of the weekend. So, Ole Miss has been struggling the last couple of weeks, lost against Florida, and then lost last week against Memphis. Granted, they have had a very tough schedule and an inexperienced QB at the FBS level. I do think this is going to be a good game. Two teams that both actually came off tough losses last weekend. A&M was not able to hold very strong against Alabama. But I do think this is going to be a very entertaining game. Game that if either of these teams still wants to be in SEC West title contention, then they're going to have to win this game. So move on to Utah and USC. So, again, this and the A&M Ole Miss game are the games of the week for me. I think that USC will win this game. They are favorites in this, but I still consider this my upset of the week. No disrespect to Utah. I think they've been a very good team this year, but I have pretty much picked against Utah every week so far this year. At least almost. Anyway, I picked them as my upset of the week last week. They were able to hang strong. But I do think that USC is going to be able to pull off this one. I think that they're headed in a better direction now since they don't have Steve Sarkisian. They did look like a revitalized team last week against Notre Dame. So I think having Utah at home is going to be a big deal. I think the Coliseum is actually going to be pretty packed. It'll be rocking. If Cody Kessler can show up, if it's whether the talent can mesh for this game or not. If they show up like they did against Washington, then they will lose. Not just lose, but lose by a lot. But if they show up like the way they did against, the way that they did at the beginning of the year, the way that they did against Arizona State, the way that they did even last week against Notre Dame, then I think they can win this game. So move on to Ohio State and Rutgers. So Rutgers has been an up and down team this season. Hard to really make anything of them. Ohio State's been starting to get, obviously, if you saw the game last week against Penn State, they've been starting to get a lot better, finding their groove through the midway point of the season. I think that they'll win this game pretty big, continue this trend of beating Big Ten teams by at least 20 points. So move on to Washington and Stanford. So I think this could be a close game. Washington does have a pretty solid defense, but that offense just looks terrible. When they did play USC, they scored 17. Looked like they could have put up basically a lot more. Lost to Oregon last week, and again, just for me, another ugly game offensively. So I do think with the way Stanford's playing right now, I think it'll honestly be a blowout. Stanford's been looking like the best team in the Pac-12 North right now. They've been on a tear ever since that loss against Northwestern, and I think that'll continue. So move on to Pitt and Syracuse. So Pitt finally cracked the top 25 this week. I do think this could be a close game. Syracuse is not a terrible team, not a great one either, but it's hard to make out. It's hard to make out how good Pitt actually is, because granted, their only loss is to an Iowa team that's looking very good now in like the very, very last second. So, I believe it was like a 55, 57-yard field goal. So, Pitt is a good team, very good on both sides of the ball. So I do think that Pitt can kind of show that they are actually one of the contenders in the ACC. So move on to Northwestern and Nebraska. Again, a game that a couple weeks ago I thought would have a lot bigger meaning. Northwestern has just not had a good last 2 weeks. I believe they've lost a combined 78-10. Lost 40-10 last week against Iowa. Now they have to go and travel to Nebraska. A Nebraska team has been very up and down this season, but they were able to win last week. I think they'll be able to win this week. So yeah, that is my predictions for Week 8. I have not gone through and calculated my record overall yet, my record from the last time, so I just wanted to shorten up the video like that. So I'll put those in the description below. But yeah, that's pretty much it. See ya.